It's been 6 months since I moved to Colorado, and not a single call, text, or email from my parents. Not a question about where I'd gone, or why my apartment lease ended, or why the birthday card they mailed never reached me. Not that they remembered my birthday anyway. I still remember that last day in Richmond. The sun was unseasonably hot for March, and sweat trickled down my back as I taped the final boxes shut. Ethan hoisted a crate of kitchen supplies with a grunt, while Mia folded down the flaps on my suitcase with her knee. My one-bedroom apartment was mostly empty by then, just stacks of cardboard and the second-hand armchair I didn't bother to sell. "Are you sure you're not going to tell them?" Mia asked, wiping her forehead with the sleeve of her hoodie. "I mean, just a text or something." I looked up from where I was labeling a box bedroom. "Donate. They haven't asked where I live in 3 years. Why would I tell them I'm leaving?" She didn't argue. She just exchanged a look with Ethan, who muttered, "Still wild to me." It wasn't wild to me. It was normal. Expected. I'd been the extra in their family portrait for as long as I could remember. Quiet, invisible, acceptable, only when useful. Lucas was the sun, the center, the reason the camera flashed. I was background. The U-Haul we'd rented creaked as we loaded in the final box. I shut the door with both hands, pressed my palms against the metal until it clicked. Then I stood there for a moment, staring at the place I'd called home for almost a decade, not because it held memories, but because it held silence. "Ready?" Ethan asked, swinging the keys around his finger. I nodded, more than ready. The drive to Durango was long and quiet. I watched the landscape shift outside the window, from city grit to pines, from crowded to clear. By the time we hit Colorado, something in me had already begun to loosen. My new apartment was nothing special. One bedroom, slightly outdated kitchen, a narrow balcony overlooking the mountains, but it was mine. Mine in a way nothing else had ever been. I hung my own photos set up my desk exactly the way I liked it, cooked real dinners without anyone interrupting or ignoring me. I got up early, logged into work, watered the herbs in the kitchen window. Ethan and Mia visited every other weekend. Agnes, my grandmother, called every week without fail. No one else called. That was the part that made me laugh some nights. Not bitter laughter, but the kind that sounds hollow in an empty room. I had vanished, and no one even blinked. Not until last week. When the phone rang and the name lit up, I didn't answer right away. I just stared at it. William Carter, like it belonged to a different life. I picked up on the fourth ring. His voice came through clipped, irritated. "You need to come home next weekend." I should have known what that call meant. The flatness in his tone wasn't disappointment or confusion. It was entitlement. I was being summoned, and not for my sake. I didn't ask for details. I told him I had plans and hung up before he could begin his usual follow-up lecture. Then I sat back at my desk, stared out at the snow-capped ridge behind my apartment, and felt that old weight settle over me. Not sadness, just recognition. This was how it had always been. When I was 8, I made honor roll for the 3rd time in a row. I laid the report card neatly on the kitchen table where I knew my mother would sit down with her tea. She glanced at it once and said, "Good job, honey," without looking up from her phone. That same week, Lucas got a C+ on a math quiz and still got to pick dinner. The year I won first place in the regional science fair, I came home with a trophy half my height. My teacher had pulled me aside that morning and said I should be proud. I was. I wanted them to be too. At dinner, I placed the trophy on the counter. My father said, "Let's not make a big deal out of it, Grace. Your brother has finals." That was the year I stopped bringing awards home. By the time I turned 17, I knew I'd be paying for college myself. I got into a state school with a scholarship, picked up 2 part-time jobs, and stopped coming home for breaks. It was easier that way, cleaner. I graduated early, moved into a shared apartment, took whatever freelance work I could find. My resume grew faster than my social life, but I didn't mind. Work was something I could control. Work didn't forget me at the dinner table. Eventually, I landed a job with a cybersecurity firm based in Denver. Remote, flexible hours, full benefits. I'd been there almost 3 years now. My boss said I had a knack for untangling the chaos that other engineers overlooked. My savings account had commas in it. My fridge had real food. My inbox had a pre-approval letter from a mortgage broker. I was 29 years old and finally thinking about buying a house. Nothing big, just mine. So when my father's voice tried to pull me back into obligation into performances dressed as family duties, I didn't flinch. I just let the silence stretch long enough to make it clear I wasn't coming. "You need to come home next weekend." That was the first thing he said. Not hello. Not how have you been, just a directive delivered like I was still 18 and waiting for permission to breathe. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Why? There was a pause. I could practically hear him rolling his eyes through the phone. "Your brother's engagement dinner. Emma's parents want to meet the whole family. They're very traditional. Of course not a reunion, not a reconnection. Just another image to maintain a daughter-shaped placeholder at the table to round out the illusion of family. I won't be there." Another pause, sharper this time. "What do you mean you won't be there?" "I mean exactly that," I said. "I have other plans. Grace, this is important for your brother's future. They're high-profile people. It'll reflect badly on us if you don't show up." There it was. Us, not me. Not how I was doing or where I'd been. Just the optics. "I moved to Colorado 6 months ago," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not flying across the country for a dinner I wasn't even invited to until now." Silence. The kind that isn't quiet at all, but charged like air before a storm. "You moved to Colorado without telling us. You didn't know where I was before." Why would this be different? His voice dropped low and tight. "How dare you move without telling your family?" "What's your address?" I almost laughed. "Do you even remember my last one?" He didn't answer right away. And that told me everything. That's not the point. It's exactly the point I said. You're not asking because you care. You're asking because now it's inconvenient not to know. "Grace, this isn't how families work." "No," I said, "but it's how ours always has." I hung up. My hand didn't even shake. For a moment, I just sat there, letting the silence rush back in. Then the screen lit up again. Missed call, then another. Then a text from him from my mother, then Lucas. I didn't answer any of them. I just turned off my phone, made myself tea, and stood on the balcony watching the light drain from the sky. By the next morning, the texts had turned from reminders into guilt, and from guilt into threats. By the end of the week, I'd received 6 voicemails, 11 texts, and 2 emails with subject lines like, "Can we talk?" and "Families should stick together." My mother finally called. Her voice was tight with restraint, like she was trying to sound warm without dropping the script. "Sweetheart, this isn't like you. You've always been so respectful. Your brother's counting on you. Emma's parents are formal people. We need to show unity." Unity. A word that means nothing when it's only summoned for guests. "I'm not going," I said simply. "Grace, don't be difficult." "I'm not. I'm being honest." She sighed, frustrated. "It's just one dinner. You don't have to stay long. Smile, say a few words, and then you can disappear again if that's what you want." "You mean like I already have?" Another silence. Then she hung up. Lucas tried next. His tone was different, less forceful, more confused. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you and Mom and Dad, but can't you just show up for me?" I almost felt something. Almost. But I remembered all the years he looked away while I was overlooked. "No," I said, "not this time." The next day, my father called again. His voice had shed the pretense. "If you don't show up to this wedding," he said, "you're out of the will." I let the silence stretch just long enough to give him hope I was weighing it. Then I said calmly, clearly, "I make more money than all of you combined." I could hear him inhale like he'd been slapped. "You're bluffing. If you'd ever asked about my life, I said you'd know I'm not." He didn't respond. He just hung up. That was the last call I took. From that point on, I watched the messages come in like waves. First urgent, then desperate, then angry again. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I opened a new tab on my laptop and clicked back to the real estate listing I'd saved the week before. It was still there. 3 bedrooms, cedar siding room for a garden. Agnes called the next morning, just as the sky turned pink behind the mountains. She never waited for permission, never checked if I was free. She just called and I always answered. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice steady with that mix of gentleness and knowing. "How's the air up there today?" "Cool and quiet," I said, "like I like it." We talked for a few minutes about the lavender I'd planted on the balcony, about the elk that sometimes wandered behind the apartment. Then she paused. "They asked me to call you," she said, not apologizing, just stating the fact. I figured, I said. "Let me guess. Convince me to come back and play the part." They didn't use those words. "But yes," she said. "Your mother's been pacing. Your father's in a mood. They're panicking because they miss me." She hesitated just long enough. "Because Emma's parents are watching and asking questions." I laughed under my breath. Of course, my value had finally surfaced, tied neatly to someone else's expectations. "I'm not going, Grandma." "I know," she said. "I wouldn't either. That's why I always picked up." She didn't sugarcoat things. She didn't make excuses for them or pretend the past hadn't happened. She remembered my birthdays, sent me postcards from her little trips, asked about my job, and actually listened to the answers. She was the only one who ever looked directly at me and saw more than what I could offer. "I just wanted you to hear it from someone honest," she said. "Not because I think you owe them anything." "Thank you," I said. "Are you okay?" "I am," I said, and I meant it. Really. I stayed on the phone with her until the tea in my mug went cold. She asked about the house I was looking at and whether I planned to paint the walls or leave them plain. We talked about furniture and apple trees and things that had nothing to do with obligation. By the time we said goodbye, the sun was warming the windows and I had already opened the mortgage calculator again. The wedding day came and went without me. I spent the morning on a trail just outside Animas Mountain, weaving between tall pines and early spring wildflowers. The silence out there wasn't empty. It was earned. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder what was happening on the other side of the country. I breathed deeply, let the wind move around me, and kept walking. When I got home that evening, there was a missed call from Agnes. I called her back before even taking off my boots. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. "You enjoying your mountain air?" She exhaled slowly. "Well, the wedding happened." I waited. "It was tense," she said. "The kind of tension that looks polite on the outside but makes your neck stiff just sitting in the same room." "Sounds familiar," she chuckled. "Your parents did their best to keep it together, but Clara couldn't stop fidgeting. Your father barely spoke." Emma's mother kept glancing around like she was waiting for someone. "Me?" "Yes." "And when she realized you weren't coming, she asked why." I closed my eyes, let the moment land. "What did they say?" "They tried different versions. First, they said you were sick, then that work had called you away, then that you were traveling for some conference. All lies. Emma's mother knew it. You could see it in her face." She pressed harder. "Asked why you hadn't been at the engagement party either. Asked why she only found out you existed a few weeks ago. And apparently she had a private conversation with your mother after the rehearsal dinner. No one knows exactly what was said, but your mother came out of it pale and quiet. I think she got read like a book." I almost smiled. "What about Lucas?" He looked distracted all night, kept checking the door. Never smiled long. Emma looked upset through most of the ceremony. "I don't think she bought the family portrait they were trying to paint." I sat down at the kitchen table, letting that sink in. Not out of malice, just at the kind of satisfaction that comes from truth finally catching up to the noise. "They still think this is about a dinner party," I said. "I know," she replied. "But Emma's parents saw it. Grace, the imbalance, the omissions, the damage." We talked for another 10 minutes about nothing in particular. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and scrolled through new listings. The house I'd been eyeing was still available. I bookmarked it again just in case. A week after the wedding, Agnes called again. I was in the middle of unpacking a box labeled kitchen. Fragile when the phone lit up with her name. "They're still talking about it," she said without needing to explain what it was. "Emma's parents. Yes, they've asked Lucas directly now. Why you weren't involved. Why no one mentioned you until the last minute. Why you've disappeared. And what did he say?" He tried to downplay it at first, but I think even he's starting to realize it's not just going away. Emma's mother doesn't like being lied to. I set down a stack of plates and leaned against the counter. "Is the marriage already cracking? There's tension, the kind that doesn't fade with a honeymoon. I didn't feel glee. I didn't want things to fall apart for him. I just felt still, like watching ripples in a pond after dropping a single stone. "They've started asking around," Agnes said. "Your parents wanting to know who might have your new number, your address. They even asked me again." "You didn't tell them, right?" "Of course not. I told them if you wanted to talk to them, you would." I breathed out slowly. "Thank you." "They're nervous," she continued. "Not just about you, about what Emma's parents might do, what they might say, what this might mean for Lucas's future. They're worried about damage control," I said. "Not about me." "Yes," she said quietly. "But they're starting to realize this doesn't just disappear. The way they treated you, it left marks." I looked around the small kitchen sunlight on the counters, new dish towels folded by the sink, a window above the stove that overlooked a row of pines. This wasn't just where I lived, it was mine. "They're the ones who disappeared," I said. "They just didn't notice until someone else did." She didn't reply right away, but I could hear the pride in her silence, the kind that never had to be spoken out loud. That night, I finished unpacking the kitchen and lit a candle by the sink. The house already felt like home. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My father's blocky, careful print, like he thought neatness could cover history. I stood at the mailbox for a long moment, the envelope heavy, despite its weight. I didn't bring it inside. I walked straight to the fire pit in the backyard, struck a match, and dropped it in. The paper curled inward, blackened, then disappeared into ash. I already knew how it ended. The next morning, I signed the final paperwork for the house. My name on every line, no cosigner, no conditions, just mine. Ethan and Mia texted about flights for next month. They wanted to see the place and help me plant the first flowers. I'd already cleared a corner of the yard for tomatoes and rosemary. Later that evening, I registered for a graduate course in digital forensics. Not because I needed it, just because I could. I changed my phone number the same week. Only a handful of people got the new one. Agnes, my boss, Ethan, Mia. That was enough. No more surprise calls. No more texts asking for favors disguised as obligations. No more family dinners where my name was an afterthought. The house was quiet, not lonely, just honest. 6 months later, my backyard was filled with voices and the smell of roasted corn and grilled peaches. Ethan was manning the grill like it was a science experiment. Mia balanced a pitcher of sangria in one hand and a stack of mismatched cups in the other. The folding table overflowed with potluck dishes, quiche, sesame noodles, a suspiciously looking casserole. Someone insisted was a family recipe. A neighbor's golden retriever flopped at my feet. Across the yard, my coworker's daughter Lily tugged at my sleeve and handed me a plastic bracelet she'd made from string. "You're my aunt now," she said solemnly. "But the fun kind." "I'll take that," I said, slipping it on. Later, as twilight settled and someone I barely knew from the next street over asked, "Do you have family back east?" I didn't hesitate. Not anymore. There was a beat of quiet, and then I smiled, gesturing to the table where Ethan was laughing so hard he'd spilled lemonade on his shirt, where Mia was dancing barefoot to a playlist I didn't even know I had. "But I have this," and I meant it. When everyone had left and the yard was quiet again, I gathered the plates, folded the chairs, and stood at the edge of the garden with the string bracelet still on my wrist. Fireflies blinked near the fence. My house glowed softly behind me. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was mine. Grace's story reveals the power of self-reliance and the importance of setting boundaries in the face of neglect. Her family's indifference prioritizing her brother Lucas left her invisible, yet she transformed this pain into independence. Moving to Colorado without informing them was not rebellion, but a reclaiming of her agency, showing that one's worth isn't tied to others' validation. Her refusal to attend Lucas's wedding despite pressure underscores the necessity of prioritizing personal peace over performative family obligations. Grace's financial success and homeownership highlight how hard work and focus can build a fulfilling life independent of familial approval. Her connection with her grandmother Agnes emphasizes the value of genuine relationships over superficial ones. By burning her father's letter and changing her number, Grace symbolically severed ties to a toxic past, illustrating that letting go can be liberating. Her new life, filled with chosen family and meaningful connections, teaches that happiness comes from authenticity and self-respect. Ultimately, Grace's journey encourages recognizing when to walk away from those who overlook you and embracing a life built on your own terms, surrounded by those who truly see and value you.
For 12 years, I worked 18-hour days building what became a $47 million restaurant empire. While my older brother Marcus spent his 20s partying and switching between dead-end jobs, I was scrubbing floors at 4 a.m., learning every aspect of restaurant operations from dishwasher to line cook to manager. By 28, I had saved $85,000 and opened my first location, a small Italian bistro in downtown Portland. Marcus never visited during those brutal first 2 years. Not when I was sleeping 4 hours a night, not when I nearly lost everything during the 2019 recession, not when I was eating ramen for dinner because every penny went back into the business. He was too busy dating Instagram models and asking our parents for rent money. My second location opened in 2021. Then my third in 2022. By 2023, I had 7 restaurants across 3 states, each one designed from scratch, each menu personally crafted, each location requiring my signature on leases, permits, and insurance policies. I hired 247 employees. I personally trained 89 managers. Every vendor contract, every supply agreement, every franchise application bore my name alone. The family started paying attention when Forbes mentioned my restaurants in their 30 Under 30 feature. Suddenly, Marcus began showing up to family dinners, talking about our family business, and how proud he was of what we built together. Our parents nodded along as if he had contributed anything beyond criticism and mockery during those early years. "Remember when you helped me plan the first menu?" I asked him once. "I gave you moral support," he replied seriously. "That's invaluable." Marcus started bringing his girlfriend to my restaurants, ordering expensive wine and telling other diners he was part of the ownership team. He never paid for these meals. When servers asked for payment, he would point to me and say, "Put it on the owner's tab. I'm family." The first red flag came during our annual family Christmas dinner. Marcus announced he had been thinking about the business and suggested we formalize our partnership, since he had been instrumental in the success. When I asked what specific contributions he had made, he listed brand development consultation, menu feedback, and strategic family networking. "You've eaten at my restaurants 5 times total," I said. "Quality control," he replied without missing a beat. Our parents exchanged meaningful looks. "Family businesses work best when family members have official roles," Mom said. "Marcus has such good business instincts." "He's never had a job longer than 8 months, I pointed out. "That's because he was waiting for the right opportunity," Dad explained. "Your restaurants." Marcus began inserting himself into my business conversations. When vendors called my cell phone, he would sometimes answer, introducing himself as Marcus, co-owner. When I confronted him, he claimed he was just helping with communications and taking some pressure off me. He started showing up at my restaurants during busy lunch rushes, walking through the kitchen like he owned the place, making suggestions to my carefully trained staff. "Maybe we should change this recipe," he would tell my head chef. "I think customers would prefer more salt." My manager at the Pearl District location called me in January. "Your brother is here asking for keys to the office. He says he needs to review the books." "Don't give him anything," I told her. "He has no authority here." He seemed pretty confident that he did. That evening, Marcus called me furious. "Why are you undermining me in front of the staff? We need to present a united front as ownership." "You're not ownership," I said. "We're family. Family businesses are partnerships. Show me one document with your name on it." "I don't need documents. I'm your brother." The situation escalated when Marcus started making promises to potential investors. A commercial real estate developer contacted me about a new location Marcus had apparently committed us to. "Your brother said you guys are looking to expand into the suburbs," he told me. He seemed very eager to move forward. I had never spoken to this developer. Marcus had found his contact information in my office and set up the meeting without telling me. "Family businesses need family involvement," Marcus explained when I confronted him. I'm just generating opportunities. You can't make commitments for a business you don't own. But I will own it. Eventually. That's how family businesses work. Our parents began pressuring me to include Marcus more and help him find his place in the company. They suggested I was being selfish by hogging all the success, and reminded me that family should support family. He never supported me when I was building this, I said. But now he wants to help, Mom replied. Isn't that what matters? Marcus escalated to hiring his own lawyer. In February, legal papers arrived at my flagship restaurant addressed to Marcus Romano, co-owner. The documents outlined a partnership dissolution consultation and requested access to all financial records. When I called the law firm, they seemed confused. Your brother hired us to review his options for claiming his share of the business, the lawyer explained. He said there had been some informal agreements that needed formalizing. There were no agreements, formal or informal. He said you had been operating as partners for years but just hadn't done the paperwork. This was when I realized Marcus wasn't just confused about his role. He was actively trying to steal my business through legal manipulation and family pressure. The breaking point came on March 15th, during Sunday dinner at our parents' house. Marcus arrived with a briefcase, printed partnership contracts, and a PowerPoint presentation about Romano Family Restaurants, a restructuring proposal. He had prepared pie charts showing his proposed 25% equity stake, his plans for strategic expansion, and his vision for professional management structure, with himself as chief operating officer. I've been patient, he announced to our parents, but it's time to formalize what we all know is true. This business belongs to the Romano family, not just one member. Our parents nodded approvingly. It makes sense, Dad said. You boys should be partners. Marcus slid the contracts across the table. Just sign here and we can move forward as equal partners. Well, almost equal. I think 25% is fair for now, given your head start. Pie head start. I stared at him. You got lucky with the timing. I would have been involved from the beginning, but I was exploring other opportunities. You were unemployed and living with Mom and Dad until last year. I was waiting for the right moment to join the family business. Marcus had actually typed up official-looking partnership agreements, complete with profit-sharing formulas, management responsibilities and decision-making authorities. He had assigned himself control over marketing and brand development, and given himself signing authority for any expenditures under $50,000. Where did you get these templates? I asked. I've been researching family business law, he said proudly. I know what needs to happen. Our parents were impressed by his preparation. See how seriously he's taking this? Mom said. He's really thought it through. Marcus opened his laptop and began presenting his PowerPoint. Slide 1, Romano Family Restaurants, Unlocking Our Full Potential. Slide 2, Current Inefficiencies in Single-Owner Structure. Slide 3, Benefits of Professional Family Partnership. He had graphs showing projected revenue increases, organizational charts with both our names, and even mock-ups of new restaurant designs featuring Romano Brothers branding. As you can see, Marcus explained, clicking through slides, we're leaving money on the table with the current setup. Family restaurants perform 23% better when they embrace collaborative ownership models. Where did you get that statistic? Industry research, he said vaguely. Slide 7 was titled, Proposed Equity Distribution. It showed him receiving 25% ownership immediately, with a path to equal partnership, within 3 years based on performance milestones he had written for himself. This is incredibly generous, our dad said. You're giving him a quarter of everything you've built. I'm not giving him anything, I said quietly. Marcus ignored this. The beauty of this structure is that it protects both our interests while allowing for growth and professional development. Slide 12 outlined his compensation package. $120,000 annual salary plus profit sharing, company car, expense account, and executive benefits package. You want me to pay you $120,000 a year? I asked. Market rate for a COO in the restaurant industry, Marcus replied confidently. You've never managed anything. I have extensive experience in customer service and business development. You got fired from Applebee's after 3 weeks. That was a cultural mismatch. This is family. Our parents were completely sold. By the end of his presentation, they were talking about Romano Brothers restaurants, as if it already existed, discussing which locations Marcus should oversee, and how proud they were of both their entrepreneurial sons. Marcus saved his contract signing ceremony for dessert. He ceremoniously opened his briefcase, pulled out 2 copies of the partnership agreement, and placed them in front of me with a gold pen. "I know this is emotional," he said gently, "but it's time to take the business to the next level. Together." Our parents watched expectantly. Mom had her phone ready to take photos of the historic moment. I looked at the contracts. They were surprisingly detailed. Marcus had somehow obtained financial information about my restaurants. Gross revenues, profit margins, expansion plans. He had built his entire proposal around numbers that should have been confidential. "How did you get my financial data?" I asked. "I did my homework," he said. "A good partner needs to understand the business." That's when I realized he had been going through my office files during his unannounced visits, photographing documents, gathering information to build his case for ownership. I looked at my brother sitting there in his new suit, completely confident that he deserved a quarter of everything I had built. I looked at my parents, beaming with pride at his business acumen and professional presentation. I opened my own briefcase. "Before I sign anything," I said calmly, "I think you should see some documents too." I pulled out the original business licenses for all 7 restaurants. Every single one listed me as sole proprietor. "Interesting," I said, spreading them across the table. "All these say owner, Elena Romano. No mention of Marcus Romano anywhere." Marcus waved dismissively. "Those are just filing technicalities. We've been operating as partners in practice." I pulled out the franchise agreements I had personally negotiated and signed. 7 thick contracts, each one requiring extensive financial disclosure, business experience verification, and personal liability acceptance. "Here are the franchise agreements," I said, sliding them toward Marcus. "Show me where you signed. Show me where you accepted liability. Show me where you put up collateral." Marcus flipped through the pages, his confidence wavering slightly. "I mean, I wasn't involved in the paperwork, but..." "You weren't involved in the paperwork because you weren't involved in the business." I pulled out the property leases. Each one required personal financial guarantees, credit checks, and extensive background verification. Each one had my signature, my social security number, my financial statements. "These are the lease agreements for each location," I continued. Each one required a $50,000 security deposit and personal guarantee of all rent payments. "Which of these deposits did you contribute?" "Well, none. Because you weren't there." I spread out the insurance policies. General liability, workers' compensation, property insurance, business interruption coverage. Every policy listed Elena Romano as the insured party and responsible party. "Here's $40,000 worth of annual insurance premiums. Which ones did you pay?" Marcus was looking less confident now, but our parents were still nodding along, waiting for his explanation. I pulled out the loan documents from when I expanded into my 2nd and 3rd locations. Personal guarantees for $300,000 in small business loans, each one requiring extensive financial documentation and collateral. "These are the expansion loans," I said. Each one required personal assets as collateral. I put my condo up as collateral for the downtown location. "What assets did you contribute?" "I provided strategic support." "You weren't there." I opened my laptop and pulled up the business bank account records. Every transaction, every deposit, every payment flowing through accounts that bore my name and social security number. "These are the business banking records going back 5 years, I said, turning the screen toward him. "Every dollar of revenue deposited, every expense paid, every payroll processed. Show me one transaction that involved you." Marcus stared at the screen, his PowerPoint confidence completely evaporated. I pulled out my final documents, the Articles of Incorporation for Romano Restaurant Group, LLC, filed with the state 3 years ago when I formalized the business structure. "And here," I said, placing the incorporation documents on top of everything else, "is the official business registration. One owner, one member, one person legally responsible for everything. Elena Romano." The table was now covered with contracts, licenses, agreements, insurance policies, loan documents, and business registrations. Hundreds of pages of official documents, all bearing my name, all requiring my signature, all making me personally liable for every aspect of the business. Not one document mentioned Marcus Romano. "So here's my question," I said calmly, looking directly at my brother. "Based on what legal authority are you claiming ownership of my business?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in 12 years he had nothing to say. Our parents looked at the documents spread across the table, finally beginning to understand what I had been trying to tell them. "But he's family," Mom said weakly. "Being family doesn't create ownership," I replied. "Legal documents create ownership. Financial investment creates ownership. Personal liability creates ownership. 12 years of 18-hour days create ownership." I started collecting my documents, placing them back in my briefcase. "Marcus, you're welcome to eat at my restaurants anytime. As a customer. You're welcome to continue telling people you're proud of my success. But you're not my partner, you're not my co-owner, and you're not getting 25% of anything I built." Marcus finally found his voice. "But I can help you grow the business." "Then go build your own business and show me how it's done." I closed my briefcase and stood up. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. The partnership meeting is over." As I walked to the door, I could hear Marcus frantically explaining to our parents that the documents don't tell the whole story, and family businesses are different from legal businesses. But the documents told the only story that mattered. 3 days later, Marcus called me, furious that I had humiliated him in front of the family, and demanding that I reconsider the partnership for the sake of family unity. "I'm opening 2 more locations this summer," I told him. "You're welcome to apply for a job like everyone else." He hung up. Last week I received a certified letter from Marcus's lawyer, threatening legal action for unjust enrichment and implied partnership agreements based on family expectations. I forwarded the letter to my business attorney, who called me laughing. "He literally has no legal standing whatsoever," she told me. "This is the business equivalent of someone demanding ownership of your house because they visited a few times. That's essentially what he's doing." I'll send a response. This will be the easiest case dismissal I've ever written. Yesterday, Marcus posted on Facebook about supporting family businesses and the importance of recognizing everyone's contributions. He tagged several of my restaurants in the post. I had him banned from all my locations. The 8th and 9th Romano restaurants open next month. Both will feature my signature alone on every document, every contract, every business decision. Just like the first 7. Family doesn't create ownership. Work creates ownership. And I've put in all the work. For 15 years I had been the family's go-to person for medical emergencies. When Mom had her gallbladder surgery, I took 2 weeks off work to care for her. When Dad's diabetes got out of control, I drove him to every appointment and managed his medication schedule. When my sister Sarah broke her leg skiing, I flew out to Colorado and stayed with her for a month during recovery. I was the one with the medical background. An MD from Johns Hopkins, board certified in emergency medicine, and department head at Regional Medical Center. But to my family, I wasn't Dr. Jennifer Walsh. I was just Jenny, the reliable one who handled the messy, inconvenient parts of life while they focused on more important things. The pattern was always the same. Crisis hits, family panics, Jenny fixes everything, family moves on without acknowledgement. Sarah would throw lavish dinner parties to celebrate her amazing recovery, and never mention the person who fed her, bathed her, and drove her to physical therapy for weeks. Mom would post Facebook updates about her miracle healing, and forget to mention who slept in hospital chairs and advocated with doctors when she couldn't speak for herself. For 15 years I accepted this. I told myself it was what family did for each other. I ignored the fact that when I had minor surgeries or even just the flu, my phone stayed silent. "You're the doctor," Dad would say if I mentioned feeling unwell. "You can handle it yourself." The accident happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I was driving to the hospital for my early shift when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into my car at 50 miles per hour. The impact crushed the driver's side, and I spent the next 6 hours in surgery for internal bleeding, a collapsed lung, and a traumatic brain injury that left me in a medically induced coma. My colleague Dr. Martinez called my emergency contact, my mother, within an hour of my admission. Jennifer is in critical condition, he told her. We don't know when she'll wake up. The family should be here. Mom's response? Oh my goodness, that's terrible. We're just so busy right now with Sarah's engagement party this weekend. Keep us updated. No one came that first day. Or the second. Or the third. The nurses who knew me from working together for 8 years were shocked. Where's your family, Dr. Walsh? They kept asking. I had always talked about my parents, my sister, my nephew. I had pictures of them on my desk, took calls from them during breaks, covered their medical bills when insurance fell short. They must be traveling, the nurses assumed. They'll be here soon. But no one came. Not when I developed pneumonia from the ventilator. Not when my condition deteriorated and doctors weren't sure I'd survive. Not when I finally opened my eyes after 3 weeks and whispered my first words. Dr. Martinez visited me every day. So did the nurses from my department. My hospital colleagues brought flowers, read me the newspaper, played music they thought I'd like. The cleaning staff stopped by to check on me. But my family? Radio silence. On day 10, Sarah finally called the hospital. Not to check on me, but to ask a nurse if I'd be back to normal soon because she needed help planning her wedding. When the nurse explained I was still in a coma with unknown neurological damage, Sarah said, "Well, let us know when she's functional again," and hung up. The nurses were horrified. One of them, Maria, had worked with me for 6 years. Dr. Walsh talks about her family constantly, she told Dr. Martinez. She's always covering their medical bills, giving them medical advice, flying out for their emergencies. Where are they? I heard some of these conversations during my semi-conscious periods. I heard the nurses' concern, their anger on my behalf, their confusion about my family's absence. But I also heard something else, their profound respect for me as a colleague in person. Dr. Walsh saved my daughter's life in the ER, one said. She stayed 4 hours past her shift to make sure she was stable. When I finally woke up fully after 3 weeks, the physical recovery was brutal. Brain injury rehabilitation, relearning to walk, managing chronic pain, rebuilding my stamina. But the emotional recovery was worse. I had to face the reality that my family had abandoned me during the most critical medical crisis of my life. The first call came from Mom on day 22. Not to check on my condition, but because Dad needed a referral to a cardiologist and she couldn't figure out how to navigate insurance. "Oh, you're awake," she said when I answered weakly. "Great. Listen, your father has been having chest pains and you know how he worries. Can you call Dr. Peterson's office and get him an appointment? You know they'll squeeze him in if you ask." I was barely able to sit up in bed. I was relearning how to write my own name. But she wanted me to make phone calls for Dad's routine checkup. "I'm still in the hospital, Mom," I said quietly. "I know, honey, but this is important. Dad's really worried and you know how his anxiety gets when he thinks something's wrong with his heart. The doctor will listen to you." I hung up without making the call. Something had fundamentally shifted during those 3 weeks of abandonment. For the first time in my life, I said no to my family's medical demands. The second call came a week later from Sarah. She'd heard through hospital staff that I was finally conscious, and she needed me to review her fiancé Mike's weird rash via photos she wanted to text me. "It's probably nothing," she said breezily, "but you know how men are about medical stuff. Just take a quick look and tell me if he needs to see someone." "Sarah," I said slowly, "I've been in a coma for 3 weeks. You never visited. You never called to check on my condition. And now you want free medical advice. Don't be dramatic, Jenny. You're fine now, obviously, since you're talking. And this rash thing is really bothering Mike. It'll take you 2 seconds to look at a photo." I hung up on her too. The recovery took 4 months. 4 months of intensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, cognitive rehabilitation, and psychological counseling to deal with the trauma. 4 months during which my family called exactly 6 times, each time requesting medical favors, referrals, or free consultations for their various minor health concerns. Never once did anyone ask about my recovery. Never once did anyone visit. Never once did anyone offer to help with my medical bills, grocery shopping, or transportation to appointments, all things I had provided for them countless times over the years. I spent those 4 months not just healing physically, but evaluating my entire relationship with my family. The hospital social worker helped me see patterns I'd been blind to for years. "You've been their personal, unpaid medical concierge for decades," she observed. "But when you needed medical support, they disappeared. That's not normal family behavior. He was right. I had been their emergency medical contact, their insurance navigator, their treatment coordinator, their specialist referral service, their medical bill backup plan, and their personal physician for minor concerns. I had spent thousands of dollars on their healthcare costs and hundreds of hours managing their medical needs. But I wasn't their daughter or sister. I was their free medical service. And when I couldn't provide that service, they had no use for me. I returned to work in July, 6 months after the accident. My colleagues welcomed me back with genuine warmth and relief. "We missed you, Dr. Walsh," the nurses said. "The department wasn't the same without you." Patients who remembered me from before the accident thanked me for the care I'd provided their families. At work I was valued. At home I was exploitation. The call that changed everything came in September, 6 months after I'd returned to work. Mom called, and for once she sounded genuinely panicked. "Jenny, thank God you answered. We need your help urgently. Something terrible has happened." My first instinct was the old one: drop everything and fix their crisis. But I'd learned to pause, to think, to protect myself. "What's wrong?" I asked carefully. "It's about the malpractice suit. You remember Mrs. Henderson, Dad's patient who died during surgery 3 years ago? Her family is suing Dad for $2.3 million, and our lawyer says we need documentation from the hospital medical board that the standard of care was followed. The insurance company is threatening to drop us if we can't provide board certification that the procedure was appropriate." My blood went cold. I remembered Mrs. Henderson. She was 67, diabetic, and Dad had insisted on operating despite clear surgical risks I had advised against when he consulted me privately. I had told him the surgery was too dangerous, that medical management would be safer, but he dismissed my concerns as overcautious and proceeded anyway. Mrs. Henderson had died on the table from complications I had specifically warned him about. "The lawyer says we need a medical board review and certification from someone with authority at Regional Medical Center," Mom continued frantically. "Someone who can officially state that Dad followed proper protocol. You know people there, right? Can you get us that documentation?" I was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, when Dad had asked my opinion about Mrs. Henderson's case, I had given him detailed medical advice based on her chart. He had ignored it completely. When Mrs. Henderson died, he never mentioned my warnings. When the family threatened to sue, he never asked for my support or testimony. Now they needed me to provide official medical board documentation to save him from a $2.3 million malpractice judgment. "Jenny, are you there? This is really urgent. The deadline for providing this documentation is next week, and if we can't get board certification, the insurance company won't cover the lawsuit. We'll lose everything: the house, Dad's practice, our entire savings." "I understand," I said quietly. "You need medical board certification from Regional Medical Center." "Exactly. Can you call someone there? Maybe that Dr. Martinez you work with? Someone who can review the case and provide official documentation." "Mom," I said slowly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "Jenny, we really don't have time for. I am the medical board." Silence. "What do you mean?" she asked weakly. "I mean I chair the medical board at Regional Medical Center. I have for 2 years. Any official medical board review and certification has to come through me. Personally." The silence stretched longer. You're the chairman?" "Yes." "The position you're asking me to use my connections to reach? That's my position. The authority you need for board certification? That's my authority. The person who will review Dad's case and determine whether proper medical protocol was followed? That's me." I could hear her breathing, but she couldn't speak. "And Mom?" "I remember Mrs. Henderson's case very clearly. I remember the consultation Dad requested. I remember the detailed medical advice I gave him about surgical risks. I remember him dismissing my concerns as overcautious. I remember him proceeding with a surgery I explicitly advised against. And I remember Mrs. Henderson dying from exactly the complications I warned him about." More silence. "The medical board review will be very thorough. We'll examine all consultation records, including the detailed written advice I provided Dad before Mrs. Henderson's surgery. We'll compare his actions to standard medical protocol. We'll determine whether he followed appropriate procedures or ignored medical advice from a board-certified emergency medicine physician." "Jenny," she whispered, "you can't. We're family." "Family," I said quietly. You left me in a coma for 3 weeks. No visits. No calls. No concern for my survival or recovery. But now you need the authority and position you never acknowledged I had, and suddenly I'm family again. I could hear Dad in the background asking what was wrong, asking what I was saying. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. The medical board will review Dad's case according to standard protocol. We'll examine all medical records, including consultation documentation. We'll interview all relevant medical professionals who provided advice. And we'll determine whether proper medical standards were followed. But we're your parents, Mom said desperately. You can't do this to us. We'll lose everything. Mom, I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing my job as medical board chair. The same job I've had for 2 years while you thought I was just Jenny who could get you appointments. The same professional position I held while I was in a coma and you couldn't be bothered to visit. I paused, thinking about all those years of emergency calls, all those medical bills I'd covered, all those appointments I'd arranged, all those times I'd dropped everything to handle their medical crises. You know what's interesting? I continued. For 15 years, you've treated me like your personal medical concierge. Free consultations, referrals, bill paying, appointment scheduling, emergency care coordination. But you never saw me as the medical professional I actually am. You never respected my education, my expertise, or my position. I was just convenient. Dad got on the phone. Jenny, you're being ridiculous. Of course we respect your career. But this is family business. You can't let professional rules destroy your own father. Dad, when Mrs. Henderson needed surgery 3 years ago, and you asked my professional medical opinion, was that family business or professional consultation? You were helping me think through a difficult case. I was providing expert medical consultation based on my training and experience. I reviewed her chart. I assessed her surgical risks. I provided detailed written advice recommending against surgery. That wasn't your daughter talking, Dad. That was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, board-certified emergency medicine physician, giving you professional medical guidance. But you ignored that professional medical advice completely. You never mentioned my consultation when Mrs. Henderson died. You never referenced my warnings when the family threatened to sue. You dismissed my medical expertise then, but now you want to use my medical authority to save you. I could hear Mom crying in the background. The medical board review will be comprehensive and fair. We'll examine all the evidence, including the consultation records showing that you received and ignored expert medical advice from a qualified physician. The board will determine whether proper medical protocols were followed. Jenny, please, Dad said desperately. We're your family. We love you. This lawsuit will destroy us. Dad, where was that love when I was fighting for my life in a coma? Where was that family connection when I needed support during the most critical medical crisis I've ever faced? I hung up the phone and sat quietly in my office, looking at the framed diplomas on my wall. Johns Hopkins Medical School. Board Certification in Emergency Medicine. Regional Medical Center Department Head. Medical Board Chairman. For years my family had seen none of this. They had seen only Jenny, the convenient family member who fixed their medical problems. They had never acknowledged my professional achievements, my medical expertise, or my leadership position in the medical community. They had wanted access to my connections without recognizing my authority. They had wanted to use my professional position without respecting my professional judgment. The medical board review took 3 weeks. As chairman, I recused myself from the final determination due to conflict of interest, but I provided all relevant documentation to the board, including the detailed consultation records showing that Dr. Walsh had received explicit medical advice recommending against Mrs. Henderson's surgery from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, and had proceeded against that expert recommendation. The board found that proper medical protocol had not been followed, that expert medical advice had been ignored, and that Mrs. Henderson's death resulted from foreseeable complications that had been specifically identified by the consulting physician. Dad's malpractice insurance refused to cover the lawsuit. He lost the $2.3 million judgment. The family home was sold. His medical practice was closed. Their savings were liquidated. 6 months later, Mom called again. Jenny, your father is having chest pains again, and we can't afford to see a cardiologist without insurance. Can you take a look at him? I thought about the 3 weeks I'd spent alone in a coma. I thought about the 4 months of recovery they'd ignored. I thought about the 15 years of medical services I'd provided without acknowledgement. Mom, I said quietly, I'm not your family doctor. I never was. I was your daughter who happens to be a doctor. But daughters who spend 3 weeks in comas without family visits aren't really daughters anymore. You can't still be angry about that hospital thing, she said. We explained we were busy. Sarah's engagement was not angry, Mom. Just clear about boundaries. If Dad needs medical care, he should see a physician. I can recommend several good cardiologists who accept payment plans. But we can't afford. That's not my problem anymore. You'll need to figure it out yourselves. I hung up and returned to my work. On my desk was a thank you card from a patient's family, thanking me for saving their father's life in the emergency room. Next to it was a photo from the hospital charity gala where I'd been honored for my contributions to community medicine. My colleagues valued my expertise. My patients trusted my judgment. The medical community respected my leadership. For the first time in years, that was enough. The phone kept ringing, but I didn't answer. Some relationships, once broken by abandonment, can't be repaired by need. Some bridges, once burned by neglect, can't be rebuilt by desperation. I had learned the difference between being a daughter who happens to be a doctor, and being a doctor who happens to have ungrateful family members who only call during medical crises. The medical board chairman position came with authority they'd never acknowledged and power they'd never respected. When they finally needed both, it was already too late. Some consequences can't be cured, even by the best medical care.